Good evening and welcome to this special Election 2022 edition of Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. Tonight, it's a debate between the candidates for Arizona Attorney General. Tonight's debate is sponsored by the Citizens Clean Elections Commission, your source for nonpartisan official election information.
I'm Stacey Barchenger of the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. Tonight's debate is not a formal exercise. It's an open exchange of ideas, an opportunity for give and take between candidates for one of the state's most important offices. Dialogue between candidates is encouraged, provided that all sides get a fair shake, and we'll do our best to ensure that that happens.
And joining us now for tonight's debate, Abe Hamadeh, a former prosecutor at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and Kris Mayes, a former Arizona Corporation Commissioner. Candidates will now give opening statements in a randomly selected order and will later give closing statements in the opposite order. We begin with Kris Mayes.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here. I am Kris Mayes, and I'm so honored to be running for Attorney General. I was born and raised in Prescott, Arizona, lifelong Arizonan. I have been an attorney and been a member of the Arizona Bar for 15 years, and I served 7.5 years on the Arizona Corporation Commission, where we fought for consumers and we prosecuted consumer fraud and returned tens of millions of dollars to the victims of fraud in the state of Arizona. I'm also a mom, and I know as a mom that to get big things done in the state of Arizona, we have to work together. And that is what I'll do as AG. We will tackle fentanyl, we will go after drug smugglers, we will protect our water supplies, and we will protect reproductive rights in the state of Arizona and protect our democracy, which is under attack.
And now we turn to Abe Hamadeh.
I'm Abe Hamadeh. I'm a veteran and a former prosecutor. As an intelligence officer, I've served overseas and kept our country safe. As a prosecutor, I've put dangerous criminals away. I'm running for Attorney General because, like many of you, I worry about the direction of our country. Our southern border is a disaster. Fentanyl is plaguing our communities, and there's a rise in crime in our streets, and the federal government is out of touch. I've been endorsed by every single law enforcement organization, including the Border Patrol, because they know I have the backs of our brave men and women who wear that uniform and keep our communities safe. America is still the land of opportunity, but in order to have prosperity, we must have security. I'm asking for your vote to keep the American dream alive for future generations. Thank you.
All right, thank you both very much. Kris, we'll start with you. The legal law enforcement experience, what kind of experience do you have that qualifies you for this job?
Well, of the two people running for Attorney General, I have the most experience, quite frankly. I decided as a judge on the Corporation Commission, that's what the commission is, it's a judicial position, 2,700 cases worth billions of dollars. We prosecuted, as I mentioned, securities fraud at the commission. I oversaw a division of law enforcement officers at the commission who were armed and badged and brave, and sometimes our lawyers at the Corporation Commission were actually deputized as assistant attorneys general, and so I actually already have overseen assistant AGs in my capacity as an Arizona Corporation Commissioner. We also had a legal division that I managed, dozens of attorneys, and I oversaw and managed dozens of administrative law judges when I was on the commission.
Abe, legal law enforcement experience, what do you got?
I'm the only candidate who's actually practiced law and who's actually been a prosecutor. I mean, I've actually stepped foot in the courtroom, have conducted trials, but besides just my prosecutorial experience, Ted, I've actually served in the Army, and this time last year, I got back from my tour overseas. What I was doing out there was pretty complex. I was helping manage the security cooperation needs between the United States and a foreign government. I was interacting with foreign generals, heads of ministries, including working with the State Department and Department of Defense. So I'm used to challenges working with pretty big bureaucracies, but I think that's exactly what the Attorney General needs. It's a leadership role. So I'm ready to take office and bring that military leadership into the Attorney General's office.
Could I just correct one thing, guys? This is absurd for my opponent to say that I haven't practiced law. Again, I served 7.5 years as an Arizona Corporation Commissioner. I was a judge. That is, I know, Abe, you may not know much about administrative law and you may not know much about the Attorney General's office, but the Attorney General's office is basically 70% administrative law. So this idea that he continues to promote that I haven't practiced law is ridiculous on its
I think
face.
there's a difference, Ted, between being an elected official, which being a corporation commissioner, it does not require you to be a lawyer. But I've actually been
a lawyer. And
Chris, I let you finish
Okay.
first. But I've been a prosecutor. I've actually had to deal with victims. I put criminals away. But my opponent, she's only been a professor of environmentalism and a former journalist. So I don't think she has the legal experience that she's trying to claim.
Again, he seems to not be listening. But I was an Arizona Corporation Commissioner, which is a judicial position. So I decided 2,700 cases, which is quite a bit more than what, the half a dozen or dozen cases that you decided in the or worked on, Abe, in the 2 years that you worked at MCAO. I'm sorry, but the two are just not equivalent.
Chris, I think it's a difference between being a corporation commissioner, which does not require you to be a lawyer, and for me, actually being in the courtroom and actually going up against criminals and upholding victims' rights. I think there's a difference between being a lawyer and being a corporation.
Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we did go up against criminals. Again, you're not listening. As a commissioner, we prosecuted civil securities fraud and worked with the Attorney General's office to put people away for fraud, including the Baptist Foundation case, by the way, which was a fraud that involved thousands of victims. So he's just not correct on that point.
Let me jump in. We only have a set amount of time. We want to move through some topics here. Obviously, abortion access in Arizona has been in the news a lot for the past several months. Abe, will you enforce Arizona's territorial ban on abortion?
Well, I think we have to understand the role of the Attorney General. As Attorney General, I enforce the laws. So we have to understand that the legislature passed this law back in March, the 15-week restriction, but it'll have that ability that if Roe v. Wade got overturned, that our laws would remain intact. So we have to understand the role of Attorney General is not to set policy. So, I currently agree with General Brnovich's position that the law is the law. I don't want to make the law. That's the job of the legislature. I enforce the law, and I think that's an important distinction between my opponent and myself. She has said on record that she would not have enforced that the 1977 law or 1901 law or even the 15-week law. And I think that's dangerous. I think people are electing us to actually uphold the law and not to be a super legislator. So I understand my role as Attorney General has a limited power and a limited authority.
Did he get that right?
No, he got that completely wrong. And unfortunately, Abe, you forgot to read the Arizona Constitution, which is the highest law of Arizona. And the Arizona Constitution has within it Article 2, Section 8, which is an express right to privacy. And when you are reading all of these laws, whether it's the 1901 law or the 15-week ban, which has no exception for rape or incest, my opponent apparently is okay with forcing the victims of rape and incest to carry to term. That's outrageous. But the Arizona Constitution makes all of these laws unconstitutional. And when I raise my right hand in January, I will be doing that and making an oath to our Constitution. And look, I think my opponent just admitted that he thinks it's okay to ban all abortions in the state of Arizona under a law that dates to 1864. Let's remember, that was the Civil War. It was a time when women couldn't even vote. And women are going to die. Women and girls are going to die because of this 1901 law and because people like my opponent and Mark Brnovich are forcing it on the women of the state of Arizona. I will not prosecute any doctor, any pharmacist, any nurse for abortion, period, because of the Arizona Constitution.
Please.
Well, This is exactly why I mentioned her lack of legal experience. Article 2, Section 8 has nothing to do with abortion, Ted. I mean, the privacy statute she's trying to say that is included in the Constitution, if that was a legitimate argument, it would have been used prior to 1973 up until 1901. So it's just not a legitimate argument that any lawyer would take to the courtroom. You know, I think this is the sign that the difference between the candidates and I. I mean, I could disagree with the law, but ultimately I am tasked to enforce the law. I think that's the major difference. And I think it's a sign of maturity to understand your role as Attorney General is not to put your personal beliefs into your decision making as Attorney General. So there is a clear difference between myself and Kris.
So you are making a commitment that if there is a law you don't agree with, you will enforce it in Arizona as Attorney General?
Absolutely. That is exactly the job of Attorney General. I mean, the legislature passes the laws and it's signed by the governor. I mean, I think it's dangerous territory. If a Democratic legislature passed a law, I am bound to uphold that law as Attorney General. But my opponent wants to pick and choose depending on her personal beliefs. I think that's very dangerous territory that we're walking in.
Well, this is absurd. You have said that you would have decertified the 2020 election and that you would not have certified the 2020 election. I mean, for you to sit here and say that I'm picking and choosing laws is ridiculous. And again, Arizona has an express right to privacy. That is the supreme law of Arizona. Now, obviously, the Arizona Supreme Court is going to have to decide this question. I believe it is a serious argument. It's an argument that a number of scholars have made, that there is a right to privacy. And the women of this state do not deserve to have an attorney general, the current one or the one who is sitting across me who wants to be attorney general, who will force them to, who believe that they have the right to tell women what to do with their bodies. It's outrageous, it's unacceptable, and it's unlawful under the Constitution.
Ted, reasonable people can disagree with abortion. I mean, there's an argument to be made on both sides, but I am tasked to uphold the law. So that's ultimately what I'm going to do. But she brought up a point, and this is why I want to keep going back to her lack of legal knowledge and experience. The Attorney General does not certify an election, Kris. They are a witness to certification. And I understand fully well the Attorney General doesn't decertify an election as well. So I don't know why you keep...
Why did you say you would have done it?
I've been consistent on the trail. I have never said that.
I'm sorry, there's tweets that say the opposite
Kris,
of that.
you consistently...
Why did you say on this
Kris,
set?
I'm respectful for your time, and I just ask you to be respectful for my time. What I'm saying is right now, you're bringing up distorting my views right now, and you're distorting the abortion issue. I mean, you have a lack of legal knowledge, and what you're trying to do is put your personal beliefs into the Attorney General's office. It's because you're an activist general. You're not going to be Attorney General. So you have to understand the role of Attorney General has limitations, and it's not based off your personal beliefs, but rather you have to uphold the Constitution. I've done that as a prosecutor, and I've sworn to defend it as a U.S. Army Reserve intelligence officer.
To make it clear, you would defend and you would prosecute unjust laws that you considered unjust laws.
I think there's a difference between unjust versus laws I disagree with. I mean, unjust is suggesting that it would probably not be constitutional. I think there's almost rare cases where a law is so blatantly unconstitutional that gets past the legislature and the governor.
But isn't that what she's saying, that this would be an unjust law?
But she's using her personal beliefs based off of an argument article.
Hold on.
She's trying to use this idea, the privacy clause, the Constitution. No legitimate lawyer thinks that, but besides that, it just defies. She's saying that the 15-week law that was passed, 15-week restriction that was passed in March, she said she would not uphold that. So I'm confused. Why would you not uphold that if you want to have the intent of the people, which is the legislature?
I'm sorry that you're confused about the Arizona Constitution, Abe. I know you only graduated from law school a few years ago, but the Arizona Constitution says what it says. And a number of legal scholars have said that Article 2, Section 8 is an express right to privacy. Look, the Arizona Constitution has in it a number of things that the federal Constitution doesn't have. When the U.S. Supreme Court kicked the issue of abortion rights back to states, when they overturned Roe versus Wade, they kicked it back to the supreme law of Arizona. And there are multiple states, including Florida, Abe, that have an express right to privacy where this is now being litigated. In Florida, it's being litigated, and when I'm Attorney General, it's going to be litigated here. What I'm saying is the moment I take office, I am going to reverse Attorney General Brnovich's opinion that the 1901 law is constitutional and should go into place. And so there's a clear difference. My opponent wants to put doctors and nurses and pharmacists in jail for abortion care, and that's outrageous.
Ted, again, she doesn't understand the role of Attorney General. The Attorney General has no jurisdiction to prosecute these abortion cases.
Okay.
So, Kris, you're mistaken once. It seems like every single question you're mistaken on the role of Attorney General.
Let me ask you a question regarding some tweets that you made. I'm going to prosecute the crimes of the rigged 2020 election.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just forget about the fraud of 2020. I'm going to hold them accountable. Your day of reckoning is coming when I take office in January of 2023. What crimes, who is going to be held accountable, who will be held to reckoning? What are you talking about here?
All Arizonans want right now, Ted, is free, fair, and competent elections. And the media has shifted the narratives by saying that there was no fraud to saying there wasn't enough fraud to overturn the elections. We're already seeing prosecutions happening. I mean, just the other month, this administration prosecuted in Yuma County the former San Luis mayor for ballot harvesting. So there are cases, and there's an ongoing investigation still too, Ted. So I am committed to defending the law, and there are instances of fraud. I don't think it's an interesting argument you're making because there's an ongoing investigation. So when I'm Attorney General, of course, I'm a former prosecutor. You prosecute crimes that occurred in the past, and that's exactly what I intend to do as Attorney General.
Do you think the 2020 election was rigged in Arizona?
Ted, if you look at what happened, we literally at the time had elected officials changing the rules in the middle of the game. All of us want free, fair, and competent elections. We had a federal judge that was Obama appointed. He had no authority to extend the voting registration deadline, and he did by 3 weeks.
So,
and he got slapped down by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yes, the answer is yes. Do you think it was rigged?
If you're looking at, the media had influence on this too,
Okay,
Ted.
all right.
I mean, it's unbelievable. Obviously, my opponent is anti-democratic. He just told you that he does not believe that we had a fair and safe election, which we did in 2020. My opponent knows a few things about voter fraud, since he admitted to casting his own mother's ballot in the 2000s. But here's the deal: we have the safest, most secure elections in America. And my opponent wouldn't answer your question, Ted. Exactly which elections officials are you going to lock up, Abe? You stood on a stage in Prescott Valley outside of my hometown, and you chanted, "Lock them up," about elections officials like Leslie Hoffman. Who are you talking about? Are you talking about Leslie Hoffman? Are you talking about Clint Hickman? Are you talking about Bill Gates, both Republicans? No,
Kris,
just a
I
second.
can't let you filibuster this.
No.
Please.
Are you talking about Stephen Richer, one of the most successful Republican recorders in Arizona? They ran safe and fair elections, and it's rhetoric like that that is getting our elections officials into a situation where they're the subject of intimidation, harassment, and even death threats. And Ted, I want to tell you something. When I'm AG, we're not going to put up with that.
Okay.
That was a lot.
It was a lot. You have a chance to respond.
Well, there's a lot to respond to, but let me. Helping my mom vote on a ballot when I'm 15, I think every Arizona recognizes, that is such a ridiculous argument. But let me tell you, I'm going to lock up those who are criminals who commit fraud, just like the current administration is doing. When you saw a former mayor of San Luis ballot harvesting, Kris, would you prosecute that case? I want free, fair, and competent elections. I don't think that's so much to ask for. What you're witnessing right now is this erosion of confidence in our election system. And what I've served in the military, and I know, rightly or wrongly, we've spread democracy around the world all over. And we see those videos of them dipping their fingers in ink, and they're so proud that they voted. And that's exactly when you have the same confidence in our elections as well. And that's exactly what I'm committed to doing.
I want to follow up. You just cast the issue with your mother's ballot as helping her vote. You had written online that you cast her ballot for her for someone that she didn't want to vote for.
Stacey,
clarify.
I don't recall. This was 15, 16 years ago. But I want to make sure that you've done the viewers a disservice by not doing your journalist ethical duty by disclosing the fact that my opponent used to be a reporter at your paper. And she was accused of insider trading when she was at the Arizona Republic. And you have not disclosed that. So now it seems like I came to debate my opponent. I didn't know I was going to be debating all three of you. But I think it's ridiculous to suggest that what I do at 15 is somehow going to affect me when I'm Attorney General. I've been involved in politics for a while. I understand the issues, but I think people just want a fair and honest debate. I'm willing to take tough questions, but this is not what viewers care about, Stacey.
I was not even 15 when Kris Mayes worked at the Arizona Republic.
Exactly why I'm debating with you again, Stacey.
Well,
the Arizona Republic should disclose the fact that my opponent was a reporter at the Republic. She was even kicked off the campaign bus for John McCain's run for president because of how dishonest John McCain thought she was as a journalist.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Look,
That happened.
John, I was a reporter for the Arizona Republic 22 years ago. I'm proud of my time as a reporter. And I was kicked off the McCain bus because John McCain didn't like the Arizona Republic, like a lot of hometown.
Like me.
Yeah, I guess so, Abe. But look, John McCain ended up supporting me. I spent 30 years, Abe, as a Republican. And just 1 year shy of the amount of time you've been alive on this earth. And John McCain supported me. And one of the things I'm proudest of is the fact that when John McCain, Senator McCain, one of my heroes, was on the ballot, I was the second highest vote getter, second only to him, when we were running for statewide office. I represented 7 million Arizonans, and proudly on the Arizona Corporation Commission, fighting consumer fraud, fighting against undue utility rate increases. And this stuff that my opponent throws out is absurd. I was not accused of anything, and it's a whole.
Okay.
So you were not accused of insider trading?
No,
Kris?
I wasn't, Abe.
Okay.
I was
so you
not.
apologize for insider trading?
And I think you ought to be very careful about your statements in that regard.
Howie Fisher
go
wrote an
back and
article
take a
on
look at
we
take
did.
a look at the record.
Kris,
Anyway, I was a reporter 22 years
Okay,
ago.
we've got. I just want to make sure that we're clear about this. Would you have signed on as a witness to the 2020 election? Which people
Again, I think the viewers are seeing this. I like tough questions. Ted, you were here at the primary. I said the same thing, Ted. What I said is the Attorney General right now, I think there's a problem when you have the Attorney General as a ceremonial witness signer for this, because if I'm tasked to open up an investigation, that presents a conflict of interest. This isn't new. In 2000, Bush v. Gore, there was a delay of certification until those issues are resolved.
So does that mean you would not have signed on as a witness?
At the time with the issues, I've said no, I would not have
all right,
until it was resolved.
Ted, let me be clear. I would have certified and signed off on that election. The other thing I think that my opponent is not telling you about is that he wants to end vote by mail.
Kris,
As Attorney General,
she is filibustering this entire
Hold on,
debate.
hold on.
As
One of the moderators, let's get to one last issue because we're running out of time, and we really don't want to get into things that the Attorney General might not be such a major factor.
In both of your opening statements, you addressed fentanyl, immigration-related issues. As Attorney General, Abe, how are you going to combat this crisis?
Well, on day one, I've said I want to work with the legislature and the governor to declare the cartels as terrorist organizations. So right now, under Arizona law, we use the U.S. Department of State's definition of what a terrorist organization is. When I was serving overseas this time last year, the Yemen Houthi rebels were delisted by the Biden administration as terrorist organizations. They were the ones shooting missiles at us. So I think the U.S. Department of State has been politicized. Arizona has the ability to know what the threat is, and it's the narco-terrorists down our border. So with that designation of the cartels as terrorists, there'll be enhanced sentencing on them. So that's exactly one of the issues I'm going to tackle at the border. But my opponent, her top three issues, she said, are environmental justice, reproductive rights, and voting access. She has not been to the border. I've been to the border just last week.
Okay.
I see the fentanyl coming in, and it's plaguing our communities. It's something that we got to tackle. We don't have time to tackle climate change like my opponent wants.
And we don't have too much time left in this debate. We have to have a response.
I've actually been to the border, and I've worked on the border on behalf of the millions of Arizonans who live along the border as a corporation commissioner. How would I tackle fentanyl? I would bring together law enforcement officials along the border. I would go after funding for our law enforcement officials along the border. This administration, the Republicans, are sitting on a $5 billion surplus, and they are not spending any of it to tackle fentanyl. The last thing I'll say is we have seen over the last 10 years under Republican AGs and Republican governors, a rise in the murder rate in Arizona of 20%. That has to come to an end.
And this debate has to come to an end, unfortunately. Time now for closing statements. And going in reverse order of our opening remarks, we start with Abe Hamadeh.
I know what it feels like to be bullied forgotten, and underestimated. I'm the son of immigrants with a funny last name, and I have no political dynasty. My parents and I, we came from humble beginnings. We were on food stamps at one point. And that's exactly why every day when I'm Attorney General, I remember who I fight for. I'm going to fight for those victims who have been defrauded. I'm going to fight for those who have no voice. I'm going to fight for our seniors who are scared to go to the grocery store without being attacked. I'm not running for Attorney General because I'm desperate to be a politician. I'm running for Attorney General because I'm desperately worried about our country. And every single day when I'm Attorney General, I will make sure Arizona is safe, secure, and free. I'm Abe Hamadeh. I'm not done fighting for our country, and I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
And now the closing statement from Kris Mayes.
Well, thank you for hosting this debate, and I appreciate the conversation with my opponent. The fact of the matter is, and I think we have to be honest, that American democracy runs through the state of Arizona in 2022. I am running against an opponent who just admitted today that he would not have signed off on or certified the 2020 election. He has said that he wants to decertify the 2020 election. He wants to end vote by mail, which so many of us, 90% of us, use. You know, I am running for Attorney General because it's time for an AG who will stand up for the rule of law, who will protect public safety, who will go after fentanyl, who protect our water supplies, and who will make sure that the women of this state have their reproductive rights restored and our democracy is protected.
That's
Thank
our time.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Arizona Horizon's next debate will feature candidates for state treasurer. That debate is set for Monday, October 3rd at 5 and 10 p.m. here on Arizona Horizon and live streamed at azpbs.org.